Hey there folks, Rel here. If you've ever deployed a Sunderer just to have it blown up by allied C4, there's probably a good reason for that. This episode is going to be taking a look at where you should be placing your deployable Sunderers to benefit your faction the most. We'll give you some general placement strategies first, show you how to defend your Sunderer, and then cover some more specific locations that will tie some of those thoughts together. But before we get into that, let's take a quick look at the advantages and restrictions of an AMS Sunderer. The Advanced Mobile Station, or AMS, must be purchased for 50 certs, equipped on your Sunderer, and then deployed using the B button. Deploying a Sunderer creates a mobile spawn point that will give you a few experience points every time someone spawns in. Unfortunately, teammates will sometimes blow up your Sunderer just so that they can place their own in that spot and get the experience for themselves. It's definitely a jerk move, but it happens pretty often. When you deploy the Sunderer, you will create a bubble about 120 meters wide where no other Sunderer will be able to deploy near you, and this is why proper placement is extremely important. An advanced mobile station generally fills two purposes. It's either a fallback spawn point or a forward spawn point. Now, fallback spawn points are usually far from where the fighting is and are generally kept out of harm's way. They need to be back far enough that they won't prevent allies from creating forward spawn points, but not so far back that they are an inconvenience for the people spawning. So fallbacks are they're like an insurance policy on your attack or your defense, just making sure that if a closer spawn point is taken by the enemy, you'll still be able to spawn inside the zone. So there are two things you absolutely need to be sure of when placing a fallback spawn point. The first is out of sight and out of mind. Place it somewhere enemies won't think to look for it or where it's too much of an inconvenience to kill. And also, not interfering with forward spawn points. We'll talk specifically about this in just a bit, but these are the two details that essentially define a fallback. And due to the nature of a fallback Sunderer literally trying to stay off of the radar, the stealth certification is actually a viable alternative to the other defensive slots, which we'll discuss later. And for what it's worth, this is the only time I'd ever recommend using the stealth on an AMS Sunderer. So placing a forward spawn point is actually a little bit different. Forward spawns are meant to get infantry back into the fight as quickly as possible, and because of this, the Sunderer should be placed near an elevator, a teleporter, jump pad, an entrance to an enemy base, or even right on top of a control point if you can manage it. If an allied Sunderer can't deploy in one of those strategic locations thanks to your poorly placed AMS, don't be surprised if a friendly light assault slaps some C4 on the back of it and presses that little red button. That all sounds pretty simple, so let's add some complexity to it. Sunderers are high priority targets, especially since the recent updates, not just because they shape the flow of battle, but also because they're just worth a lot of experience. And that said, there are many threats a deployed Sunderer is going to face. You have C4, anti-tank mines, rocket launchers, other tanks, ESFs with rocket pods, and liberators with Daltons or tank busters. Most often though, Sunderers will die either to light assaults with C4 or engineers with tank mines. So how do we protect our Sunderers from getting blown up? Your first defense is always positioning. Now think about how you can limit the areas an enemy can attack from, so make your Sunderer the smallest target it can be. If you place your Sunderer next to a wall or in an alleyway or under an overhang, enemies have to maneuver around these obstacles to get a proper beat on you, and this is especially annoying for ESFs because it forces most pilots to hover instead of literally flying circles around you, which in turn makes them easier targets for the infantry spawning from your SUNDY. Limiting your exposure with walls or overhangs is usually a pretty sound strategy, but you still have to watch for enemies willing to go the extra distance. When you limit your exposure, you're likely limiting your field of view as well, meaning enemy light assaults with C4 will be more difficult to see coming, and they can attack from the rooftops or even drop down from the sky. It takes just 2 sticks of C4 to set a Sunderer on fire, and a shot from the underbarrel grenade launcher will finish the job. So being able to come out of nowhere and destroy your Sunderer is generally perceived as a pretty big threat. The Barricade defensive certification will help mitigate that damage all around, usually rendering this sort of attack is ineffective. But unless you're paying special attention to your Sunderer at all times, there's still a bigger threat you should be worried about. Engineers are the single biggest threat a Sunderer will ever face, thanks to anti-tank mines being used as grenades. A couple tossed under your Sunderer will destroy it before you have any time to react. Parking too close to a cliff's edge could result in engineers climbing the backside and then dropping mines on your SUNDY from above, but it's more common to see engineers running through droves of allied units just blending in with the chaos and dropping off a couple of mines before you even see them coming. The first and easiest way to prevent an attack like this is to CERT into MINEGUARD defensive slot. This is thought by most as an essential CERT on Sunderers just due to the sheer frequency of engineer suicide runs. But even without MINEGUARD, there are some ways you can prevent infantry-based attacks. But you have to do it before they get into range. When an engineer is inside a crowd of allies, it's sometimes hard to kill them because of the oblivious teammates usually soaking up all your bullets. The easiest way to stop an engineer dead in his tracks is to use proximity mines. Chances are that he will have taken at least one bullet on the way over to your Sunderer, meaning that even if he does have some flak armor equipped, a proxy mine is likely going to finish him off before any harm can come to your vehicle. If there are a limited number of paths an enemy engineer can take to reach your Sunderer, place proxy mines on those paths, but as far away from your own Sunderer as you can while still being effective. This helps to limit the friendly fire you do when a proximity mine goes off. Aside from anti-personnel mines, your Sunderer's own guns can reliably ward off enemy attacks. The easiest way to kill an enemy is by using the BULLDOG turret. Even if enemies are avoiding shots or using cover, the big blast area of a BULLDOG will usually knock out an attacker in a couple of hits. The Fury is a reasonable alternative, but requires more accuracy to be effective just due to the smaller blast radius. Regardless of which weapon you're using, the most reliable way to keep your Sunderer safe is to pay attention to and actively defend it. Because as soon as you turn your back, just for a second, that's when bad things happen. When it's under heavy fire that you just can't repair through, pack up and move until the threat is dealt with. Sometimes this can be as easy as just rounding the corner of a building and redeploying. So we've defined the two roles your advanced mobile station will fill and how to keep it alive. Now let's take a look at some specific placements for your forward spawn points. If you're on offense at a biolab, there are satellite bases that should be held for an effective assault. Place your Sunderer right up next to a teleporter room wall so that enemies can spawn and immediately get back to fighting. Usually, teleporters are next to jump pads, so it opens up two avenues of attack you can quickly reach. That said, teleporters always take priority over jump pads, because they teleport you to a more defensible position covered by spawn room walls. Jump pads take you to landing pads, which are not only more difficult to defend, but are also reachable via elevator. And this is likely where another Sunderer is going to be deployed. Elevators leading up to the air pads can be pretty risky because they're usually relatively open to enemy fire. And the only thing you can really do is to just try to make your Sunderer the smallest target it can possibly be while actively defending it, like we mentioned earlier. If you're defending a biolab and your shields haven't been taken down yet, a Sunderer is useful for allies who want to quickly access the vehicle stations, but more importantly is equipping that Sunderer with an ammo dispenser. Allied vehicles usually play hide and seek in the shields, destroying assailants and returning for repairs, but there isn't a way for them to reach additional ammunition easily. So if your Sunderer is deployed within the safety of these shields, do your team a favor and equip it with some additional ammo. Placing Sunderers near tech labs during offense is often difficult because of how open the area is and how vulnerable you are from an airborne attack. To keep your Sunderer alive here often takes an active effort. Parking near the back doors allows teammates to spawn and readily access the elevators, which is extremely important. But aside from that, there are a few nooks and crannies you can hide your Sunderer in or under, but the smartest thing to do is just pay attention to incoming threats and don't be afraid to pack up and redeploy somewhere else. At least until the shields are down. When the shields are broken, a Sunderer should be deployed in the main room. If enemies repair these shields, you'll still be able to spawn allied vehicles in their perceived safe zone. Sunderers don't always last the longest here, but it's crucial for a smooth offensive effort. On defense, the only really important thing to do, aside from parking Sunderers near satellite bases, is to keep one inside that safe zone we just talked about. Parking a Sunderer near the vehicle terminals in the main base is also a smart decision, as the trek from the spawn room to the relative safety of a tech lab is actually a pretty long one.
The facility is ours.
AMP station offense is usually a bit tricky given the defensive walls and jump pads that will allow enemies to quickly reach any part of the base. While the vehicle gates are up, parking a Sunderer outside of these gates is a good way to get allies into the fight, but it won't last long if it's noticed. Alternatives to this depend greatly on the terrain surrounding the base, as it's different with each AMP station. So sometimes you can actually find a hill that is a bit further from the defensive walls but provides more protection for your Sunderer, and is a reasonable marching distance for the allies who spawn there. After the vehicle gate comes down, there is a good many places you can hide your Sunderer, but due to the verticality of the base, airborne enemies will likely still be able to kill you. Once again, just defend your Sunderer. When the final layer of defenses are stripped, park a Sunderer inside the infantry gates the same as you would in a tech lab, and this ensures that you'll easily be able to reach the control point, the main generator, and the SCU regardless of whether the shields come back up or not. Defending an AMP station relies a little less on Sunderers given how easily it is to travel all over the base, but it's still important to have a Sunderer within those infantry gates, allowing easy access to ground and air vehicles. Keeping Sunderers near the satellite capture points will also allow allies to quickly respond to enemies looking to gain a foothold. The last defensive or offensive position I want to talk about is the average watchtower. When defending a watchtower, placing your Sunderer inside means you have threats able to reach you from pretty much anywhere very easily. They can drop in from the staircases, through the back door, or even come through the vehicle bays. In most cases, I suggest putting a Sunderer right here. A lot of people will put their Sunderer right next to the teleporters, which provides you a lot of cover if you're defending, but is next to worthless for offense, because enemies will simply use the teleporter, blow up your Sunderer, then leave. And when you're defending, enemies can come through the back door or the vehicle bay, because you're essentially giving them cover as well. And chances are you won't even notice the threat, and if you do, you can't really respond quick enough. And that's why this is my favorite spot. It doesn't matter where the threat is coming from, you will have time to get at least 2 or 3 shots of your Bulldog off on enemies before they reach you, and with the huge splash radius you can hit them even behind the walls. There are some exceptions with this though. For example, Crown is really elevated and can be fired upon inside the hangar bay from prowlers who are anchored on the hills far off, or air units just buzzing around and kind of hovering behind the bay. So nesting a Sunderer behind as much cover as possible is often preferable to keeping it in the open as you would for any other tower. This goes not just for Crown, but any tower that can be easily fired upon from enemies far away. Now I think that covers about all I had to talk about. If this video has been interesting or helpful, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about the channel. And if you have a very specific favorite Sunderer spot, please feel free to post a comment or a video response below and share that info with everyone in the channel. Thanks very much folks, Rel signing off.